Hello, fight fans. I'm that boxing writer, Jeremy Harridges, and welcome. My apologies for not putting out a video in about a week. It's been a crazy week. Last weekend, I was covering the Charlo brothers doubleheader on Showtime for fansided.com. There was a ton of coverage there. Again, I'd been following it pretty closely. I interviewed Jermall Charlo, and Sergey Derevyanchenko, all leading up to that fight. The Charlo brothers lived up to the hype, which is kind of the focus of this video. Other than that, I've been doing interviews 24/7 for Fansided, going crazy. Who have I talked to in just this last week alone? I talked to Tyrone Spong, heavyweight boxer, if you guys don't remember him. Unfortunately, most famous for failing a drug test before his originally scheduled fight last October with Alexander Usyk. Going into that interview, I had a lot of assumptions about Spong, and when you hear failed drug test, you think, okay, drug sheet. His case was unique, though. This was the first time he had ever been in trouble for PEDs, and he actually passed a drug test days before the two failed drug tests he had for VADA, and then I think like a week after the failed drug test, he passed one for VADA once more. So he went clean, fail, clean, which didn't make a whole lot of sense. We talked about that. And unlike some fighters, he didn't get offended when I asked him about his past problems. So I think you should check that out. It was a very good interview. Thank you again to Tyrone for his time. Very nice guy. Has a lot of great boxing stories. That's up on Fansided MMA's YouTube channel right now. I've also got a story on that will be dropping as well. A couple of BKFC competitors that I've talked to. Joey Beltran, I'll have that interview coming out. Nico Hernandez, very interesting case, flyweight boxer who's now fighting in the BKFC. He is a former 2016 Olympic bronze medalist. October 10th, he's in action, as well as BKFC heavyweight champion Joey Beltran. So those two are coming out. And then fighting on October 17th, I talked to junior middleweight Quentin Randall, whose story is intense. That one is going to be a heavy story that's coming out in Fansided. There's been a lot that he's gone through in his life, and thank you, Quentin, for sharing everything that you did with me. So yeah, it's been a really busy time, and as you know, there's always going to be more interviews on the horizon. But today, we're talking about Jermall Charlo, and the question that I'm putting forward, is he the best middleweight in the world? Okay? Is he the best middleweight in the world? I've heard from a lot of different people on that one, and everyone kind of goes, no, he's not the best. Like, was his performance against Sergey Derevyanchenko admirable and impressive? Beating him in a pretty clearly one-sided unanimous decision. I don't think there was any debate that he won that fight. It was a clear victory for him. But I asked that question, is he the best middleweight right now? And it depends. It depends on if you consider Canelo Alvarez still a middleweight. We know he's still got a title. He's one of the 4 champions. So looking at the middleweight champions list, WBO champion Demetrius Andrade, IBF champion Gennady Golovkin, WBA champion Canelo Alvarez, and then WBC champion Jermall Charlo. And then, of course, you've got some of the other WBA belts that are out there, but we don't need to talk about that. I mean, okay, I'll talk about it. Ryota Murata, the regular WBA champion, and then Chris Eubanks Jr., the interim WBA middleweight champion. They like to have lots of lots of championship belts in the WBA. So yeah, that's the landscape of the middleweight division. But again, do we consider Canelo Alvarez a middleweight at this point? And I'm not sure that we do. I think he's made his intention of fighting as a super middleweight pretty clear. That's where he desires to go next. Jermall Charlo, his trainer, Ronnie Shields, has been open in saying it doesn't matter where he goes. We'll fight him anywhere. And I think most people would say the same thing. When you have the most marketable boxer in all of boxing, Canelo Alvarez, sitting on the shelf, trying to figure out his deal with DAZN, refiling his lawsuit primarily for leverage, right? I think that's why he did it. If he didn't file it, then that opportunity's lost. He had to refile it, so if things don't go the way that he wants them to with DAZN, he can always say, hey, all right, I gave you guys a shot. Let's go through the court system now. So it gives him another avenue. I don't think that it's going to result in a lengthy court case. I think that Canelo Alvarez and DAZN work out their problems sometime shortly. And I think it's going to end up somewhere in the $25 million range for licensing fees for regular opponents. That's my personal estimation. We'll see what happens. Regardless, I think he's fighting at super middleweight. Jermall Charlo says he'll jump up to super middleweight to fight him. He says Ronnie Shields said that he would even jump up to light heavyweight to fight him, which he could do. I mean, he's a big frame guy for the middleweight division. But I think let's just look at him as a middleweight, and let's consider Canelo Alvarez a super middleweight. I think he eventually vacates the WBA belt and ships up to super middleweight full time. So looking at the other fighters there, yeah, I'm convinced that he is the best middleweight minus Canelo Alvarez. I think he beats Demetrius Andrade, Gennady Golovkin, and the other WBA belt holders, if I'm being perfectly honest. Now, after the fight, after Jermall Charlo's performance against Sergey Derevyanchenko, I asked him that very question, and let's hear what he had to say. And play. Jermall, congratulations on a masterful performance.
Yes, sir.
Do you feel that this proved to the world that you are the best middleweight in the world?
Yes, I'm the best middleweight in the world, the WBC middleweight in the world. You know what I'm saying? They may have to make 2 franchises if they really want to, see the best. Right? I fight the franchise.
So a clear, emphatic answer, yes. Jermall Charlo thinks he's the best middleweight in the world. Looking at the other fighters there, and let's just focus on 2. Obviously, you've got Demetrius Andrade and Gennady Golovkin. Let's take a look at why Jermall Charlo beats those 2 at this point. Gennady Golovkin, let's start there, only has 1 loss and 1 draw, all coming against his 2 fights with Canelo Alvarez. Unless you're blind, you have to be able to see that Gennady Golovkin isn't the same fighter he is today as he was in his first Canelo Alvarez fight, which I thought he won. I thought he won the first fight. The second fight was still close, but he didn't perform the same. Yes, a lot of people say that he didn't fight the right fight. Why did you change your style? I don't think he had a choice. I think the wars and the age have caught up with him. I think that's who he is now. His fight with Sergey Derevyanchenko back in October of 2019 was a very close fight. Yeah, he knocked down Derevyanchenko in the first round, but I thought he got outworked throughout the second half of the fight. You put him in there with a younger guy, 30-year-old Jermall Charlo, who's bigger. At this point, I think he's stronger, in my opinion. I mean, if you compare just flat-out KO ratings, yeah, Gennady Golovkin's got the better KO rating, and he's got great one-punch power. But I think Jermall Charlo has that too, and I think he's developed it over the years. The speed, the athleticism, the size, they're all in Jermall Charlo's favor. I think he does the same things that he did against Derevyanchenko against Gennady Golovkin. I hate to compare fighters' performances against similar opponents, but you saw Jermall Charlo thoroughly beat Derevyanchenko. Gennady Golovkin didn't thoroughly beat Derevyanchenko. There's nothing that Gennady Golovkin does that tells me that he can beat a guy with Jermall Charlo's athleticism. I saw movement and defensive work from Jermall Charlo in his fight with Derevyanchenko that I don't think I've really seen before because he hasn't been pushed to show that. And I said that within my column, that he showed some really slick boxing in moments, some really good defensive movements. He worked the shoulders. He got up on the balls of his toes. He moved around the ring well. He counterboxed when he had to counterbox. He became aggressive when he needed to become aggressive. He really showed the depth of his ring IQ because he was pushed to do that. I think Gennady Golovkin can still push him, very much like Derevyanchenko did, but I think it's the same result. I think it's a guy that doesn't get hurt by Golovkin's power and a guy that can outthink him and outbox him purely due to physical ability, and his ring intelligence has really grown. So yeah, I think Jermall Charlo takes Gennady Golovkin. You can tell me I'm wrong, but I know I'm right. And then obviously the other matchup would be Jermall Charlo versus Demetrius Andrade, DAZN Matchroom fighter. Can that fight be made? Yeah, I think that fight can be made. Demetrius Andrade is an interesting opponent. He's a difficult guy to fight. Again, doesn't get enough credit for his knockout power. He has knockout power, but he's not known as a knockout puncher. His southpaw stance and the fact that he's also a larger framed middleweight make him difficult for anybody. High boxing IQ, Olympian. He's got all the tools. He likes to make ugly fights. He's got a very unorthodox fighting style. He will cause problems for a Jermall Charlo. But I don't think that he beats Jermall Charlo. Again, the athleticism in favor of Jermall Charlo. Ring IQ, well, that could be a 50-50 one. Andrade is a very smart fighter, but when it comes to two guys that are both intelligent, yes, he's a southpaw, I still have to go with what I'm seeing from Jermall Charlo as the more complete fighter. Plus, his resume is stronger. I know that people don't often look at Jermall Charlo as having the most depth. However, just throwing Derevianchenko on there blasts him out of orbit when compared to Demetrius Andrade's record. I mean, his last fight was a 9th round TKO versus Luke Keeler, guy that no one really knows. Maciej Sulecki was a legitimate challenge. And he beat him by unanimous decision, and it was he won every round in that fight. So that one bodes well for him. But if you're going to put Maciej Sulecki versus Sergey Derevianchenko, there's no comparing it. Yeah, he's fought some fringe contenders, Alantez Fox, Jack Colkay, which he won by split decision. I think we should throw out there as well. And Willie Nelson, who was a solid fighter at the time, but definitely had his vulnerabilities. Vanes Martirosyan at the time was a serious contender, won a split decision there as well. So he's got some lower B tier fighters on that record, which you could say the same for Jermall Charlo, right? I don't think you're going to look at Dennis Hogan and say that he's a world beater, especially at the middleweight division. But again, against a guy like Derevianchenko, I think we saw the best of Jermall Charlo, and I think he can do it over and over and over again. And I think he escaped that fight with very little damage. So yeah, if you tell me who has the ability to take over the middleweight division in the absence of Canelo Alvarez, it's got to be Jermall Charlo. Regardless, I think the Charlo brothers put their stamp on the sport. Jermall Charlo has 3 of the 4 junior middleweight titles. Their time, I feel, has come. They did everything that they said that they were going to do, and they're going to have an exciting future, to say the least. I throw in some clips of my conversation after Jermall Charlo's knockout of Jason Rosario, but me being the novice that I am with technology right now as I'm still learning, I recorded my audio, but not his. So going to have to miss that one. Just wanted to throw that out there, talk a little bit of middleweight action with you guys. Don't forget to check out my work at fansided.com/boxing. Also, make sure that you visit my website, thatboxingwriter.com. I'll be coming at you shortly with another video. Make them more regular. Thank you for watching. Take care.